بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. I remind you to have a sincere intention in your heart, seeking reward from Allah Ta'ala by attending the lesson. Inshallah Ta'ala, our lesson today is about the funeral prayer. So we will start, inshallah, by talking about what is an obligation upon the ones, a communal obligation to do upon the ones who were aware that a Muslim died. And we will talk about the funeral prayer. We will talk about washing the dead, shrouding the dead, and inshallah, if time permits, we will also talk about burying the dead person. So, washing, shrouding, praying for, and burying the dead Muslim is a communal obligation if this person was born alive. So, here we are talking about the Muslim. And this is very important. So we're not talking right now about the kafir. We're not including the kafir in this right now. We are talking about the Muslim. So washing, shrouding, praying for, and burying the dead Muslim is a communal obligation if this person was born alive. So a communal obligation, not a personal obligation. A communal obligation upon whom? Upon those who were aware that this Muslim person died. So this person who died as a Muslim, these four things need to be done for this person. Washing, then shrouding, after washing, then performing the funeral prayer, and then burying this Muslim. It is an obligation to shroud and bury a dhimmi. If a dhimmi is a kafir who pays dues referred to as al-jizya in Arabic to the Muslim ruler. Now, when we say here dhimmi, I'm not talking about the kafir who is not a dhimmi. So the kafir who is not a dhimmi, none of that is obligatory to be done for this person. So a kafir who died and was not a dhimmi, none of these four things that were mentioned is obligatory to be done for this person, okay? In fact, it is not permissible to pray for the kafir. If we know that a person died and this person was a kafir, a disbeliever, it is not permissible for us to perform the funeral prayer for this person. We do not ask Allah Ta'ala to have mercy upon a person who died as a disbeliever. And when the Muslims perform the funeral prayer, during that prayer, they ask Allah for forgiveness for that person who died. So if this person who died is a disbeliever, it is not permissible to ask Allah to forgive this disbeliever, because it is clearly mentioned in the Quran that Allah Ta'ala does not forgive the one who died on the status of disbelief. Allah Ta'ala mentioned in the Quran, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَغْفِرُ أَن يُشْرَكَ بِهِ وَيَغْفِرُ مَا دُونَ ذَلِكَ لِمَن يَشَاءُ. So the one who died as a disbeliever will not receive the mercy from Allah Ta'ala. As for this dhimmi again is a kafir, but he used to pay al-jizya, it is referred to as al-jizya in Arabic, dues to the Muslim ruler. Now, today we do not have a caliph, okay? So we don't have disbelievers who are paying al-jizya nowadays, all right? So we don't have a dhimmi today. In regards to this dhimmi who is a kafir, of course, and we just mentioned it is not permissible to perform the funeral prayer for him. So what do they do then for this dhimmi who died? It is an obligation to shroud and bury this dhimmi if those who share his belief did not already do that for him. Okay, so if those disbelievers like him who were aware of his death did not do that for him, then it is an obligation to shroud and bury that dhimmi. It is not permissible, again, I repeat, to perform the funeral prayer for him, and it's not an obligation to wash him. And of course, he or she is not buried in the Muslim cemetery, because the Muslim cemetery is just for the Muslims, and this dhimmi was not a Muslim, so he is not buried with the Muslims. Okay. So we spoke about what is an obligation to do in regards for the person who died as a Muslim and he was first alive, meaning he was born alive and then he died. And we mentioned pertaining the dhimmi. Now, if a Muslim was born dead, what is referred to as stillborn, for this Muslim, what is an obligation to be done is to wash, shroud, and bury this baby. Okay, it's stillborn. However, the funeral prayer is not performed neither for the stillborn nor for the dhimmi, as we mentioned. Okay, the person who dies in combat, meaning he died as a result of fighting the non-Muslims. This is referred to then as a battlefield martyr, a shaheed. What does one do regarding this person who died as a result of fighting the non-Muslims in combat, fighting the disbelievers? So the one who dies in combat against the non-Muslims, and this meaning was the cause of this person's death, this person is shrouded in the battlefield clothes that he was wearing, even if they were stained with blood. So he is shrouded with these clothes that he was wearing if they were enough to cover his whole body. If they were not enough to cover his whole body, then more cloth will be added to cover the remaining of his body. So then if these clothes are not enough, they would add more material. And this martyr then is buried and not washed and not prayed for. So the martyr then is not washed and not prayed for. And you know, the one who dies as a martyr has a very high status, mashallah. So this is a person who died in combat fighting the disbelievers. And of course, this person needs to have had sincerity in performing this act. Okay, his heart was sincere in performing this act and fighting the disbelievers for the sake of Allah, and not, because he wanted recognition, for example. Now, inshallah, we will talk about washing the dead person. How is it done? So the minimum requirement for washing the dead is to remove the najas filth and to use pure and purifying water. So one removes the najas filth from that person's body, and then one uses purifying water. So for it to be purifying, it needs to be pure. So it is water that is pure in itself, and it purifies, so it is purifying, and one washes then the whole body of this diseased person. Okay, the whole body is washed, meaning including then skin and hair. In this case, even if the hair was thick, it is still washed. The minimum is one wash. Okay, for the whole body, one wash. Now, in terms of shrouding the dead, the minimum requirement for the shroud is that what covers the entire body. Okay, so one shrouds this person with cloth that covers the whole body. However, if this person who died was in the state of ihram, was a muhrim, was performing hajj, was still in the state of ihram, and probably that the male who is in state of ihram, he is not allowed to cover his head, and the female who is in the state of ihram, she is not allowed to cover her face. So when they shroud this person, if he is a male, they don't cover the head. If she is a female, they don't cover her face. when shrouding. Okay, so the minimum requirement for the shroud is that which covers the entire body, or 3 wraps if the person who died left an inheritance that exceeds their debts, meaning this person had debts. However, the inheritance that they left exceeds the debt that they have, provided they did not request to leave out being wrapped with 3 wraps. So even then, if this person left an inheritance that exceeds their debt, but if they, before their death, they requested not to be wrapped in 3 wraps, then in this case, they wrap this person with 1 wrap when shrouding them in a way that covers the whole body, as we mentioned. And again, we spoke about the one who died in the state of ihram. So first then they wash, then they shroud, and then they perform the funeral prayer. So now, how does one perform the funeral prayer? And those who attended last week's lesson, I told you that the format of the funeral prayer differs from the format of the 5 obligatory prayers. So how is then the funeral prayer performed? So if one is able to stand, then also one has to stand. Okay, so one stands if able, and one has the intention in the heart to perform the prayer for the dead person, and that this prayer is an obligation, along with specifying that it is a funeral prayer. Then, of course, one starts the prayer also by saying Allahu Akbar. So again here, when is the person intending, when is the person establishing the intention in their heart? When they are saying with their tongue, Allahu Akbar. So they start the prayer by saying Allahu Akbar, again loud enough that they can hear themselves, and at the same time they have this intention in their hearts. The funeral prayer does not have ruku' nor sujood. They say Allahu Akbar the first time. With Takbirat al-Ihram, they enter the prayer. And we said, while saying Takbirat al-Ihram, which is the first time they say Allahu Akbar, in their heart they intend, then they recite Al-Fatiha. After the second Takbirah, they say Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Okay, that's after the second Takbirah. Then they say Allahu Akbar a third time. Okay, takbirah a third time, and then after the third takbirah, they ask Allah Ta'ala to forgive this. So for example, they say, Allahumma ghfir lahu warhamhu. And if she was a female, Allahumma ghfir laha warhamha. So they ask Allah Ta'ala to forgive this person. This is after the third takbirah. After the fourth takbirah, they say, they conclude the prayer by saying, Assalamu alaikum. Now, of course, it is good after that to make further dua for this person who died. The fourth matter which is left then is the burial for this person who died. Now, the Muslim, of course, is buried in the Muslim cemetery. And it was mentioned that if there is no reason to delay the burial, it is better to rush with burying him and not to delay that for no reason. The minimum requirement for the burial is an excavation that masks the odor of the dead person and protects their body from predatory animals. I know that many people, after a while, there's a smell that starts coming out of the person's body. Okay, I'm not saying all of them, no, but for, some, this is what happens after they die. So how then are we to bury this dead? The minimum, as we said, is an excavation that masks the odor of the dead person after, they pour the sand over the dead body again, and protects their body from being dug by predatory animals. Okay, so that it is protected from these predatory animals from coming and digging it and maybe eating it, subhanallah. Now, it is recommended for the grave to be dug to the depth equal to the height of a person standing with his arms extended. Okay, this is recommended. And to widen it. And it is an obligation to direct the dead person towards al-Qibla. Okay, so this dead person then is lying in the grave and they direct him or her towards the Qibla. Many people probably nowadays, they are burying in something that is referred to as a mausoleum. This is not permissible to be done. Okay, so we Muslims do not do that. This is like a structure that some people use to bury the dead, and they admit one dead person before the one who was put in it first decayed. And it is not permissible for us to bury our Muslims in a mausoleum. Okay. Now, subhanAllah, even though we said it is recommended to dig that deep and to widen it, nevertheless, this grave is not like our home, you know, neither from its distance nor from its width. It is not like the home that we are used to. And you probably notice that many of us, if we were to stay at someone else's place for a while, afterwards, many of us long to be back in our own home. We say, I want to be back in my own bed. I feel more comfortable in my own bed. SubhanAllah, when the person is put in this grave, there is no return to one's home or to one's bed. And if we think about it, our stay in the grave is longer than the time that we had in this life. You know, even if we live more and more years, the time we're going to be in the grave is a lot more. So, subhanAllah, I remind myself and I remind you here also that for that place, meaning the grave, we really ought to work. Many of us now in this life, we work very hard and we are willing to study plenty of hours a day and go to work many hours a day and get jobs that pay a lot. Why? Because often we want to buy furniture that we like, because we want our homes to be comfortable for us. But our stay in these homes is not long. You know, you notice actually how time we say is flying by. SubhanAllah, the weeks are going by fast, very fast. So our time in this life is a very short journey, whereas in the grave we will be a lot longer. So really we should think about that and think how we can make our time in that grave comfortable. How can we make it comfortable? By working now for it, by being obedient to Allah, by performing the obligations and refraining from all the sins. And if we fall into committing sins, to repent right away, because we don't know when we will die, so we should not delay repenting. We should not take sins lightly, even if it is a small sin, still it is a sin. So when the person is pious, and this piety is achieved by performing all the obligations, refraining from committing sins, when the person is pious, this is what helps one be comfortable in that grave. And then, even though for those who are digging the grave and who are looking at it, it seems like a tiny spot and a dark spot, yet this person who died as a pious believer, he or she will find great enjoyment in this grave. And this we believe because our religion taught us this. So even though we don't see that, but we believe in that. So this person then will have comfortness and enjoyment, great enjoyment in that grave, in which he or she will stay for a long time before resurrection comes. Inshallah ta'ala, we work for that, to work towards making our graves comfortable, illuminated, and widened for us, inshallah. Barakallahu fikum, inshallah. We will start a new chapter next week. We ended this chapter. And I didn't mention that, but of course, what applies, the conditions that applied for the prayer apply for the funeral prayer as well. So they perform the funeral prayer by directing themselves towards the Kaaba. They cover the unlawful nakedness, of course. They perform it after having performed wudu, of course. So the same rules here, the conditions apply as well. May Allah Ta'ala bless you. May Allah Ta'ala increase your knowledge and admit us to paradise without prior torture.